Welcome to our next Psychological Health Talk. Today we're going to be talking about the basics of behavior change. As we get started, I want to be clear that there are two ways of looking at behavior change. One is looking at very short-term kinds of behavior changes. I need to accomplish a particular task, or I need to encourage one of my coworkers or one of my children to take care of something, and I want to elicit a particular kind of behavior change. That very kind of short-term change, we'll talk about in just a minute, but that's not what we're going to be talking about today. We're talking about today a more sustainable, long-term change in behavior. What are the key factors that we need to engage with that allow us to be able to make changes that will have an impact on our life over the long term? So if you're looking at, for example, living a healthier lifestyle, having regular exercise over an extended period of time, being able to be in a place where you're feeling more content and more satisfied with your life over a longer period of time, these are key factors that are necessary in order for us to sustain that behavior change over time. Now, I'm old enough that back when I was in school, when we talked about behavior change, it was based on laboratory experiments that were done primarily on like lab rats and pigeons, rats negotiating a maze for food reward at the end, pigeons pecking at a spot on the wall in order to obtain a food reward, and trying to understand how all of that worked. And that was really helpful for very specific kinds of behavior change that helps us to be able to do things that we need to do that are very specific and very short term. We're not going to be focusing on those today. We're going to be focusing instead on this longer term, more sustained behavior change. And in order to do that, we're going to be focusing on 4 key factors. So as we looked at all of this, and we looked at how to help people to make sustained behavior change, the very first thing that we assumed was that if we gave people the right kind of education, really helped them to understand why they should make this change, what they should do, and gave people enough information that it would result in people choosing to make those changes and be able to make those changes over the long term. Turns out it wasn't quite that simple. So we educated people on the value of exercise and why it was so important to maintain exercise throughout a person's lifetime. We still see a lot of education about that. 10,000 steps, what to do for weight training, all kinds of different things. And that's important. I don't want to diminish it, but it's not sufficient. We need to go beyond the why and begin to talk about how those changes are made that make us able to sustain that behavior change. And so that's where we're going to get into these 4 factors. The first of the factors is the factor of establishing a healthy identity. Now, we actually have many different identities. So if you knew me, apart from just these talks, and you spend a little bit of time with me, you would find out that one of my identities is a Packer fan. I have followed Green Bay Packer football since I was 10 years old. And that was actually when Vince Lombardi was just beginning to come into his own as a coach, and I got the pleasure of seeing those great Packer teams of the 1960s, and I've been a Packer fan ever since. It's one of my identities. So I can show you my Packer sweatshirts and my Packer hats and all of those kinds of things because we have many different types of identities. I would also identify as a psychologist. The question for us is, do I identify myself as a person who is a healthy individual? And this is so important that we're going to talk about it more for our entire next talk. So I want to introduce it today, and then next week we're going to go more in depth. Now, having a healthy identity and developing that identity as a healthy person helps me to filter through the many choices that I could make in any particular situation in my life, and out of that identity, particularly healthy choices can surface, making it easier for me to make the right choice at the right time. We know that, again, when somebody has an identity, let's say they're a Packer fan, and they run into somebody who's a Bears fan, there are certain kinds of behavior choices that immediately surface as ways to interact with this particular individual. I try not to do all of the things that I think about at those times, because I don't want to be an individual who's also not a compassionate and engaging individual. But you get the sense of those rivalries cause us to make choices. That's what a healthy identity is about. And a healthy identity as a healthy person will allow us to make different choices. We'll talk about that to a significant degree more next time. Once I've decided that I'm a healthy individual, the next thing that I need to do is have a plan for how to move from where I am to where I want to be. And that involves figuring out what's important. If, for example, I want to be living a physically healthier lifestyle, I might need to take a look at, okay, so should I be doing something about my weight? Should I do something about my diet? Should I do something about my exercise? Should I take particular kinds of medications or supplements? Should I spend more time interacting with my doctor? All of these things are things that I could choose, and as I'm trying to make a change in my behavior that's more sustainable, one of the first things that I need to do is I need to sit down and say, okay, of all of these different things, what are the key things that I need to address in order to be able to make a change that will move me in the direction of being able to live more fully in the identity that I have. And that might involve thinking ahead a little bit. Now, again, we've got a kind of a bias that goes on right now. The bias that we get from the way we've set up our medical system is that bias is often focused around things to avoid. Don't eat this kind of food. Don't be too sedentary. Don't miss your medications, and that is not wrong, but it's limiting. One of the things that we'll need to do in order to have a sustainable change is think ahead in an active way. What are the things that I need to have in my life, rather than what are simply the things that I avoid? Because the truth is that if I avoided everything that was bad for me, I'm not even sure that that's a possibility, but if I avoided everything that was bad for me, my life could be very small. I'm avoiding the sun so I don't go outside. I'm avoiding eating fast food so I have a very limited diet. I'm avoiding conflict so I minimize the individuals that I interact with. And that avoidance can help to eliminate some things, but it doesn't help me to establish the kind of direction in my life that will really take me toward the identity that I am trying to construct. So it is important to also think about what do I need to approach rather than just simply what do I need to avoid. And it turns out that that's actually a little harder to do. It takes a little practice. When we begin to think about what do I need to approach, it might be that starts out as kind of vague, and it has to be refined a little bit. Here's a behavioral principle that is pretty obvious, but one that we often don't think about enough, and that is that we get better at what we practice. So if I practice avoiding, I get better at avoiding. If I practice approaching, I get better at approaching. And so if I start out and I'm thinking about what do I want to add in my life to make my life better, but it's kind of vague, if I practice thinking about it, I'll get better at it. And that is an important dimension of finding a way to really have and establish a better lifespan. The third thing, once I've got a plan, I've got an idea of where I want to go, that's where the roadmap really begins to be important. And while we might consult with experts in helping us to establish a healthy identity, with developing the right plan for ourselves, this is actually the place where the experts are most beneficial for us, is developing the roadmap. So let's say that part of what I want to do is I'd like to get stronger. I want to make sure that my muscles are well developed and will sustain me over my lifespan, so that as I age I can still have the kind of movement that I want, and I can engage in the kind of activities that I want without excess pain. An expert trainer can help me to develop the right roadmap to get there. These exercises are the exercises that are the most important. These exercises will help to develop that. This one will help to develop this. That expert can help me with that. When I want to eat better, experts now can help me with the roadmap. How do I identify the foods that are going to be the healthiest for me? Maybe even helping me to identify if there are any foods that I need to add into my diet so that I can have a more well-rounded and more nutritious kind of diet. As I've discovered over the years, knowing that I want to eat more of these kinds of foods then has another problem. How do I prepare them so that they will be tasty? One of the myths that we seem to have is that eating healthy food means that we have to eat food that tastes awful. Turns out that that's not true at all. In fact, one of the things that my wife and I have discovered is that when we're eating a healthy diet, our food tastes remarkably good because we take the time to consult with experts to help us to learn how to pick the right foods and how to prepare the right foods, and even how to eat the right foods in a way that allows us to savor those foods and really enjoy them. These are things that are really important for us and help us to be able to be effective in this much more long-term sustainable behavior change. The fourth of the qualities is to find ways to develop good habits. So here's the thing. Our conscious ability to pay attention is actually quite limited. It's estimated, I think this was given by somebody who didn't probably have quite enough to do. It's estimated that we have about 16 billion choices, that's billion with a B, billion choices that we could make at any moment in time. So, you know, you can be listening to me, you could be hearing the birds outside, you could be wondering why you're thirsty, you could be wiggling to get yourself comfortable on the seat that you're sitting in. There's all kinds of choices that we can make. Consciously, our conscious ability to pay attention, which means I'm thinking about what I'm doing and I'm doing it because I'm actually consciously selecting it, is remarkably limited. In fact, we are able to pay attention consciously to about 7 bits of information, plus or minus 2. 16 billion opportunities, consciously able to pay attention to 7 things. One of the effects of that is that in order to survive, we had to develop the ability to develop habitual behavior. This is behavior that we do without needing to pay conscious attention. One of those that's pretty obvious is the ability to take a breath. You don't need to pay attention to every breath in order to be able to breathe. It's a habit that is a biologically grounded habit, and you do it without thinking about it. Now, you can think about it, and that's characteristic of habits. You can think about it, and you can alter it by thinking about it. So right now, if you wanted to, you could take a deeper breath than you were taking before, or a shallower breath. But then, if you stop paying attention to it, you don't stop breathing, you continue to breathe. These habits become very important, and they allow us to maintain good behavior, or in the case of bad habits, they allow us to maintain bad behavior over a sustainable period of time. One of the things that we know about people who are trying to quit smoking, for example, is that the most difficult challenge in quitting smoking is that smoking becomes a habitual behavior. You don't smoke at random times, you smoke at times that are quite similar. So people who smoke will often light up a cigarette when they're on a break from work, or when they're in the car, or there are certain things that they associate with smoking, and so it triggers the habit. Well, in order to have sustainable long-term behavior change, we have to do something very similar. We have to have things that trigger the habit. So, for example, I have a habit of exercising in the morning. So one of the things that I do when I get up in the morning is I have my exercise clothes right there. I exercise at home, so I have my exercise clothes right there. And when I go into the bathroom to get started in the day, one of the very first things I do is I put on my exercise clothes. That triggers, for me, I've got my exercise clothes on, so that means I'm going to exercise. And it makes it easier to sustain that habit because I'm already prepared for it. And there are many ways that those habitual behaviors can help us to sustain good positive changes. And in one of our future psychological health talks, we will talk about how to develop habits that can be sustainable as well. So these 4 things help us to sustain good basics of behavior change over a long period of time. Developing a healthy identity, creating a plan to move toward, rather than just avoid, move toward things that are going to be good for us. Find ways to determine a good, solid, effective roadmap so that the efforts that I'm making are moving me in the right direction. And then create habits, ways of automating that behavior over a longer period of time to help us to be able to sustain that. So next week we're going to talk more about that healthy identity, and I hope you'll be willing to tune in. Be sure and look at our other offerings on our YouTube channel. Thank you.